Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class. I'm Dr. Petra, and happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. Especially a huge, giant happy birthday to Richard Williamson, who is here along with Ryan. You should see the blossoming studio that we have right here in the sanctuary. It is absolutely amazing as we continue to learn more and more and move towards live streaming our Sunday celebrations. We're live streaming this thanks to Richard and Ryan. So it's truly amazing to watch all of this come together. And I'm so glad that you're with me today, with me this morning, as we continue on in our Science of Mind. We are finishing up on page 173. I want to read this sentence as we're talking about mental and spiritual treatment in the whole section on spiritual mind healing. Because as we know, there is power. There is power in our consciousness, power in our thinking, power in our use of the universal principles. And so spiritual mind treatment teaches us how best to do that. In a very coordinated way. So I want to finish this one section. This is the very bottom of page 173 for those of you who are following along in your book. In giving spiritual treatments, we find that the more completely the mind turns away from lack, the more completely the thought stops trying to figure out how the demonstration can be made, the more completely it refrains from willpower, and strange as it may seem, the less it tries to concentrate, the more power it has. So we are admonished to turn away from the condition in our spiritual treatment, not by pretending it doesn't exist, not by denying that it's an experience, not by not having compassion for ourselves and others who are actually having the experience, but in our spiritual work, when we are doing deliberate, concentrated spiritual mind treatment, we are to turn away from lack. We are to stop trying to figure out how it's going to happen. We are going to completely refrain from our willpower, willing it so, and it's not about concentrating. I'm going to think it well, I'm going to think it finished, I'm going to think it complete. It's not about concentrating. When we let go of all of those things, the more power our spiritual work has. Why? Because treatment has nothing to do with any effort which attempts to concentrate energy. We're not sending energy, we're not doing anything with energy, right? There's lots of energy work, energy healing. That's a different kind of work, absolutely powerful and wonderful, but it's a different kind of work. When we're doing our spiritual work in consciousness, we're not trying to concentrate the energy of life. The energy of God is already concentrated everywhere. It's life. It's the very universal presence and principles already concentrated anywhere. The gardener does not will potatoes and cabbages into being, but has a willingness to comply with the laws of nature and provides the conditions which make it possible for those laws and principles to produce the outcome. So in our spiritual mind treatment, and remember we've been talking about two different kinds. We've been talking about the mental treatment, which is the argumentative treatment, and the spiritual treatment, which is the realization treatment. They both use the same 5 steps of treatment, but there's a difference in whether we're convincing ourselves of the truth or whether we're simply reveling in the truth and aiming that truth at a particular demonstration, a particular outcome that we want. So I had said last week that we would take a minute and talk about the 5 steps of treatment. For those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with it, the 5 steps of treatment are the one thing that Science of Mind adds to the body of spiritual growth in the Western culture, the Western tradition. And it combines the teachings out of the Gospels from Christianity and the teachings of Hinduism, using the universal principles and understanding the law of cause and effect. And so the spiritual mind treatments, the 5 steps, is essentially what is required to really shift and embody a new consciousness, a new belief, a new idea, a new mental equivalent, a new deep experience of truth with a capital T. These are the things that are required in the shift in consciousness so that our demonstration can be assured. So the 5 steps in treatment, the first one is the recognition step, where we actually just recognize that there is a universal power and a universal principle, life, that divine reality, whatever names we want to call it, from the matrix and the quantum field to spirit and God. All of those names that we use to capture the idea that there is a spiritual reality from which the physical reality is birthed. So we recognize that that is the work we're doing, and we recognize that that's the causal reality, that everything that we see physically and experience in the human condition has a mental and spiritual cause. And so we recognize how the universe operates. In the second step of spiritual mind treatment, called the unification or identification step, what we're doing is remembering, oh, right, we're a part of that. And that life that is living everywhere is also living as us and is awakening to itself. Consciousness is awakening to itself as us. So we recognize, we unify, and then we identify ourselves as spiritual beings. Oh, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm the universe showing up as an individual. And therefore, I, too, can use the universal principles to co-create. Just as the macrocosm is creating the physical universe, I am co-creating using those same universal principles in the microcosmic universe, basically in my life and the life of humanity. And so once we have established those 2 deep embodied experiences in our spiritual work, then we go on and we affirm in the realization step or the declaration step the demonstration that we desire, and we show ourselves how, because something is true universally and we're a part of that, it must also be true in our own life experience, or the shifted condition that we want to manifest. Once we have fully embodied that it's already present in consciousness, we've created that causal reality, that mental equivalent in our consciousness, and we recognize that the universal principle must manifest that, then the natural 4th step is to be grateful to know the truth, to be grateful to know that, to understand the universal principles, to be grateful that we can, in fact, use these tools and techniques to shift consciousness and embed ourselves in truth. And then finally, the last step is that we have to let it go. Remember that part about it's not our willpower, we don't have to figure it out, we don't have to concentrate. We have to let it go and allow the universal principles to go about its business of creating and that which we have spoken our word for. So we spend a lot of time on developing our ability to work with these 5 steps of treatment. Not like there's anything magic about the formula, right? It's like the scales on a piano. You have to learn the scales first before you can start playing music and ultimately improvising. Eventually, the form becomes not an imposition, but it becomes a natural flow out of which we do our spiritual work, because we're constantly reminding ourselves in our spiritual work that we're moving out of the human condition into spiritual truth, which is causal reality. We want to stop having conditions be causes. We want to have intention because. Do you see the difference? We want to stop reacting to the things that are going on around us, but to set new causes in motion in a very intentional and deliberate manner. That's what we're doing with our spiritual mind treatment. And we expect it to produce results. So the next section is when and what is a demonstration. How do we know that something is happening? What can we expect? So spiritual mind treatment, when we do spiritual mind treatment, it inevitably does, in fact, make us feel better. It inevitably does, in fact, make us remember spiritual truth. And for me, that is a moment of, okay, right, I don't have to worry about it anymore. I'm deeply embedded and grounded in my spiritual reality. And now I can go about the actions that feel appropriate with confidence and faith. So I feel better. But my spiritual mind treatment hasn't actually been completed until there's a demonstration. So what do we mean by demonstration? In the language of metaphysics, a demonstration is made when the thing is accomplished. When the thing is accomplished, whether it is health, happiness, or abundance, a demonstration is a manifestation. It is an actual outcome. When desire is given a subjective mold, which is what we're doing in our spiritual mind treatment, we're providing the mold that the universal principles fills with our demonstration. When desire is given a subjective mold and then becomes objectified in the life of the one for whom the treatment is being done, whether that's ourselves or someone else, this is a demonstration. So we should expect to see it. So if we are doing spiritual mind treatment for health and well-being, we should expect that we can go back to the doctor and the evidence, the outer evidence, corroborates the healing. We should expect that as we're doing work to shift consciousness on a cultural scale, that we should see manifestations and actual objective demonstrations that things have changed, that they are changing, that new cause is in fact showing up in an actual form. We cannot demonstrate beyond our ability to mentally embody an idea. So if you've been with me now for a couple of years, right, that starts in the whole conversation about our work with our consciousness and our understanding. So this is why we do the steps of treatment. This is what the argument is about. So listen to this statement. I love this statement. The argument is between our experience, what the world believes, and what we are convinced is the truth. That's what we're arguing about. Not like fighting, arguing, but creating a case. Yes, I might have had this experience, and yes, the world believes this, but the spiritual truth is in fact that. And that is what I'm going to focus my attention and commitment on, my conviction, hold that consciousness in my spiritual treatment, and expect it to demonstrate. So I'm going to stop there. So we've talked about two things. One is that our spiritual work does not include concentration or willpower or the manipulation of energy or any of those kinds of things. It is as simple as using the natural laws, the physical laws, only we're using universal principles. And the second is that when we do our spiritual work, we should expect it to demonstrate physically outwardly. It is not enough just to feel better. We should see demonstrable manifestations and changes in our life experience. So we're going to stop there, and love for you to comment, share, tell us a story, ask a question. You know, this class is truly enlivened when you participate and when you engage. So I pretend that you guys are all sitting here with me, as we have done in the past, and you know, and then I'm looking around like, okay, who's got a question, who's got a comment? So we're going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to bring you in to the conversation. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Dr. Petra.
He's got his announcer voice on.
I was at the truck meet all weekend doing races. So I appreciate it for introducing me once again. And for all those who are here in our Zoom room, you can hit the raise your hand icon located down at the bottom of your screen, or you can always put it in the chat room. And if you're on Facebook Live watching with us today, go ahead and put it in the comment section, and we'll read some of those out loud too. So
Yay.
the first person that I have is Waleen. Waleen, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, Waleen.
Hey, Dr. Petra, how are you?
I'm so happy to hear your voice.
Yeah, you too. It's good to see you. I get to see you. So, great at manifesting, love spiritual mind treatment, practice it constantly. And can you talk about those things that you have to, or we seem to pray for over and over and over, and how to, for me, it just becomes a faith walk, right? And then but I would love to hear what you have to say about that. And I'm certain that others, but those consistent things that we want, that we just, nothing's really changing one way or the other, but it's just still a prayer, of something that I really desire that is taking a long time.
Yes, it's a great question, Waleen. And of course, we do struggle with that and deal with that. I want to hop over into the next page on 175 under Let Us Not Fool Ourselves. So we'll start this as the answer to that question, but we should not fool ourselves about any demonstration. We know there is a state of consciousness which can heal instantly. But if we do not arrive at this in a moment, we should never admit defeat. Let us not despise our sums in addition, because we cannot at the outset extract the cube root, right? So we start where we are. And those things that we tend to need to do spiritual mind treatment for over and over and over and over again, the reason that we have to do that is because the contrary belief is so deeply embedded in the subjective mind. And it's been laid down in our own lives since the beginning of our life, however and wherever. It's been laid down in our cultural psyche for hundreds of years. These ideas, well, they started out as ideas, but when they become embedded in our subconscious mind, they become beliefs. And a belief is nothing more than that which I think is true. It doesn't have to be true. I only have to think it's true. Like, I don't want to say just, I think it's true, but like I really, there's something within me that just says, this is the truth. And it doesn't have to be true with a capital T. It could be something that's completely false. But if I say this is the truth, right, that is a belief that I have. And the more deeply that belief is embedded, the more power it has had over the years of developing a embodied idea of that. And so in our spiritual mind treatments, we are to a certain extent dismantling that old belief and putting a new belief in its place. Sometimes that's super easy. There are aspects and areas of our life that are not ones in which we have conflicting old beliefs. And so we demonstrate pretty quickly. We can also demonstrate in a crisis. I need money now. I need a healing now. Why do we have so many stories about instant healings and people going into remission with life-threatening illnesses, but the cold lingers on and on and on and on? Well, it's because the cold isn't life-threatening. And we don't put all of our mental and spiritual awareness to bear on it. So in a crisis, we can demonstrate. This is the difference between demonstrating specific outcomes and demonstrating a shift in consciousness. Ultimately, what we want to do is to demonstrate the shift in consciousness, which means we no longer create crisis in that particular aspect of our life. And then we don't have to do spiritual mind treatment about specific things in that particular arena of our life. So for me, it was always about relationships. And I can remember thinking the thought when I was 15 years old. I remember thinking the thought, when I'm in a relationship, somehow I poison it. That became a deeply held belief that I had. Now, I can tell you about my childhood and the experiences that I had in my childhood that caused me to observe unhealthy relationships, caused me to experience unhealthy, toxic relationships. But what happened is all of that coalesced into a belief that I held that I am basically poison in a relationship. Well, that is such a powerful, deeply held belief that then played out for years. For years in my life, it played out with one toxic relationship after another. So I can remember when I decided, well, I wanted to really heal that, and I want to experience healthy relationships, not just romantic, but every relationship, healthy relationships, starting with I am supportive of others, they're supportive of me, all the way to healthy, intimate relationships. I think I did that treatment for 5 years before I even saw an increment of the needle moving outwardly in the demonstration. What was happening in those 5 years is essentially, I don't know how else to explain it, but how I experience it now is essentially that 5 years was one entire long, uninterrupted spiritual mind treatment, because it took me 5 years to embody that I was not poison in a relationship. That's how long it took me to root out that belief. Oh yeah, I could manifest a little more better communication, and I could manifest learning how to tell the truth, and I could manifest starting to bring less abusive people into my life, and slowly but surely relationships each one felt like they got a little better, and each relationship taught me something more about who I needed to be in the relationship. But it was 5 years before I picked up my head and looked around and thought, wow, my relationships are so much healthier than they've ever been. And so that's why it says never admit defeat. Never admit defeat. Those subconscious beliefs that are so deeply embedded can really, I don't want to affirm, God forbid I should affirm that it takes any one of you 5 years to heal anything. I so don't want to affirm that. And yes, in fact, if I could have any time during those 5 years completely embodied that I am love made manifest, that would have in that moment healed. But it took me 5 years to completely embody I am love made manifest. And I am love in a relationship. Do you see? It just took that long for me. And so when these things that we're treating for over and over and over again, part of what we have to do is we want to stop focusing on just specific outcomes, but really focus our treatment on, I am healing whatever that old belief is, whatever that unconscious pattern is that's keeping me from my good. And never give up. This is, as Willene said, the faith walk. It's living an answered prayer. It's expecting, as Troward said, with cheerful expectation, by God, this is going to manifest in my life, and I am not going to give up. And whether it's healthy relationships or prosperity or healing racism in America, never admit defeat. Stay committed in the spiritual work of the spiritual truth, no matter what. That takes a fair amount of confidence, and that is, in fact, what it means to walk in faith. It's a great question, and it is the most challenging part of this. I will say one more thing, and I'm going to turn to you, Ryan. It is completely acceptable if during the 5 years, let's say, we are wanting to create a new business, and it's taking a long time for our business to get off the ground. It's taking a long time for things to manifest. It's really okay if in the middle of that, we ourselves have a deep inspiration. Wait, maybe this isn't actually what I want to demonstrate. You can change your mind at any time, but it has to be you changing your mind deeply from a spiritual point of view, not changing your mind because you're giving up. All right, Ryan, we're going to turn to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Petra. I just wanted to read this comment that Rhonda had put in the chat. She said, wow, just having the realization and remembering all the spiritual mind treatments I received while going through the last several years of major changes in my life have manifested / demonstrated. And I'm really living the life that was spoken for me and has demonstrated fully in so many real ways. Thank you, CSL. So I thought that was really
Yay.
good.
Thank you, Rhonda. That is so awesome. And you see, there's in some senses there's a cumulative effect. Yes, we can demonstrate something. I need $1,000 to fix my car, or I need a $150,000 loan to expand my business. Yes, but what we actually want to be developing in addition is the consciousness of prosperity, the consciousness of a healthy relationship, the consciousness of lives that work, the consciousness of walking around in a world that works, right? And that is a larger body of work that we're doing. And we should just as much expect that to demonstrate as we do the specific shift, the healing, the manifestation of the thing that we want to bring into our lives. So I want to read to you. Is this going to be true? I feel like I say this a lot, but I love this book. There's so much great stuff in it. This is probably my favorite sentence in the entire Science of Mind textbook. Okay, are you ready? This is my favorite sentence. It should be understood that we can demonstrate in spite of ourselves, in spite of all weaknesses, in spite of all fear, in spite of all that is in us, because such is the power of truth. It should be understood that we can demonstrate in spite of ourselves, in spite of all weakness, in spite of all fear, in spite of all that is in us, because such is the power of truth. Do you see, the other thing that happened for me in that 5-year period of time when I was working on healthy relationships is that I came to realize that I needed to stop focusing on the fact that I had that I had a thought that was so counter to spiritual truth. Every time that I looked at this thought, that I was poison in relationships, I felt bad. I cataloged all the ways that that had shown up. I couldn't believe it was still hanging around. I got mad. I got frustrated. And by doing all of those things, of course, I was allowing that belief to be causal in my life over and over and over again, and cataloging all the reasons why it was appropriate for me to have that thought, how I had learned it from my mother and my father, and that they hadn't shown me what a healthy relationship looked like. It was terribly toxic. And then on and on and on, and proving to myself that I had a right to have these what shall I say? I don't think a right is the right word. It should be expected that I have these thoughts that I'm poison in a relationship, because I wanted to blame them and make them wrong. And all of that process continued to keep that thought in place, that belief in place. But do you see, as I gradually began to entertain the notion that love is right where I am, that I can be love in a relationship, that I can show up as love, that I am actually love, as I began to entertain that notion, do you see, that is the power of truth. That is the truth with a capital T. And truth is like turning on the light in a dark room. The old ideas can't fight back. They don't fight back. And when there is no energy propping them up, they dissipate like fog in the morning sun. So we don't actually have to fight with the old beliefs. What we have to do is to simply continue to embody truth to the best of our ability. So in spite of the fact that I had those false beliefs, and in spite of the fact that I had a crappy childhood, and in spite of the fact that I had demonstrated over and over and over again how toxic I could be in relationships, in spite of all of that, the truth is more powerful. Do you see? And our spiritual mind treatment is to move us to that place where we embody that truth. So it goes on to say this: the possibility of demonstrating does not depend on environment, condition, location, personality, or opportunity. The possibility of demonstrating does not depend on environment, condition, location, personality, or opportunity. It depends solely on our belief, our acceptance, and our willingness to comply with the law, the universal principles. So what does this mean? This means that in our spiritual work, we focus on the truth unencumbered by the past, unencumbered by current events, unencumbered by our own experience, unencumbered by our human feelings, unencumbered by whether or not we think we have an opportunity to change things, unencumbered by any human fact about us, whether it's our sun sign, or our Myers-Briggs, or the color of our skin, or where we grew up, or any of those kinds of things in our spiritual work. And so as we do our spiritual work, and we work to believe, as I work to believe that love was the truth of my being, and I work to accept that despite appearances, despite my own weaknesses, despite my own past, despite my own experiences, and despite all of the people who agreed with me that I was toxic in relationships, and my willingness to comply with universal principles, which was in my spiritual work, I was going to focus on that and that alone. That creates the avenue for demonstration. What that also does is that it allows me now to go back into my life and to engage with my environment, with my conditions, with my locations, with my own personalities, and with my opportunities or lack thereof, with a cheerful expectation of a demonstration. Do you see? Now I had to do some hard work in all of that. 1, I had to stop trying to change other people. 2, I had to stop clinging to relationships thinking that, well, this was as good as it could get, that I could not actually have better ones. I had to stop imagining that there was something wrong with my personality, or there was something wrong with the way that I show up in the world. I had to stop excusing some of my behaviors based on my past or my sun sign or whatever, right? All of that work is the doingness in the world, right? I treat and I move my feet. I do my spiritual work, which is 100% causal reality based only on spiritual truth. No condition is allowed to enter into that. No past, no circumstance, right? It's causal reality in its purest sense. And then I have that deep embodied belief, acceptance, and willingness to now go into the world and do the work in the world with confidence. And I will tell you that it was working on the belief that because the universe was love, I was love too, was actually the easy part. The harder part was the acceptance that I was love and could be loved. Do you see? That was the arc of the spiritual mind treatment that took me 5 years and that changed everything in my life. Never give up. Never give up. And remember that you yourself are part of the outpicturing of the demonstration. Sometimes we have to be shifted and changed. We have to change old ideas. We have to let go of things that we've been holding on to and clinging to for the reason why we are the way we are, the excuses that we use, the rationalizations that we use, the blame, all of those kinds of things. All of that we have to be willing to let go of and accept our new spiritual truth as the truth of who we are. All right, so Ryan, I saw your hand, so let us turn to you again.
Well, I'm over here with Bobby, and we're talking about a new Petra clothing line. And the first shirt that we want to print up, it says, "The truth with a capital T will set us free."
Yes, I love it. Absolutely. Right? And so this is what's so important when we're talking about our spiritual work, is sometimes I think we conflate our spiritual reality with our human reality. And so what we do is we take our human condition into our spiritual work. And so when we're doing a spiritual mind treatment, we start arguing around, well, this has to change and that has to change, and we start trying to figure out what has to happen for the demonstration. And we're actually bringing conditions and personality and past and all of those things into our spiritual work. No. And then what we do is we take our spiritual truth into our work in the world, and we are uncompassionate to other people. We are unwilling to listen to the experience that we're having. We are unable to embrace or engage with the conditions that we are confronted with, and we lose our deep conviction that our spiritual truth will carry us through the engagement. So we become fearful of negativity, and we don't want to deal with what's going on, and we don't want to see it, and we don't want to look at it because we're afraid it's going to overcome our spiritual truth. How can it? Spiritual truth with a capital T, as Bobby and Ryan said, sets us free. And so we conflate these two things. And we want to, I don't want to say separate them, because Spiritual work is the causal reality, and it's the way in which we can work in the world. But we don't want to confuse it. So Thomas Troward talks about this fabulous thing called secondary causation. Right? And secondary causation is when we make a condition causal in our lives. And that's what we don't want to do. We want to do our spiritual work purely in the absolute, with truth with a capital T. And we want to do our work in the world with a cheerful expectation for demonstration. All right, let's see what other comments there are out there. Comments or questions?
All right, I'm going to have to say it. I have Dr. Cecilia Williams.
Hi, Cecilia.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
I was just thinking while you were talking, I noticed that, for some things I can do spiritual mind treatment, and I can embody exactly that which I am envisioning, and I can really take ownership of that change. But sometimes when it comes to health, and maybe it's your parents who are experiencing COVID-19, and they switch and have a night and day experience. I experienced that yesterday, and it was with my dad, and his blood saturation, oxygen levels were really low, and it scared me. And I literally could not even do treatment for my dad because I was so scared. And I reached out to practitioners and asked for it to be sent to everyone, and it was. And this morning he woke up fine, and his levels are normal, and etc. But all I could do in that moment, because I couldn't think to even treat, I was just like, at first I was just like in stunned shock, right? And then it was, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That's all I could go to. And I literally sat on the bed, rocked and cried for, a bit. And then I was like, no, it's okay. And I just kept going to, there's only one life, and just repeating that mantra to get myself through it and get these stupid imagination things out. How our imagination can go wild with us. And, well, I don't know about us. I know about me. It goes wild.
Yep.
And it took me a good hour or so, maybe 2 hours to get out of that fear. But I knew I placed my trust, too, in the practitioners, knowing that they could see the truth where I was struggling. And so sometimes when it is a really tough situation, I think having that practitioner prayer support is something that is important for me to remember, but also important for me to use.
Yes.
Because I know that treatment works. I know it works beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Right.
But there are moments where I struggle to remember that truth with a capital T. Absolutely love that. I think I'm going to have a t-shirt made and I'm going to wear it so you can see it.
I love it.
But, I just wanted to share that with you.
Yes.
I really appreciate with what you were saying.
Beautiful. Cecilia, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so grateful that you reached out to the practitioners and that your dad is doing better. You have shared a really beautiful story and two really important things, right? The first one is that when something is very emotionally activated within us, it can be really challenging to reach for the spiritual truth and to reach for our spiritual mind treatment. And so the building of some kind of a mantra or some kind of an affirmation that helps us curtail the spinning out of our imagination and our fear and all of that is critical, because we don't actually want to give any more any more energy or any more credibility to those things. And you said, you sat there for an hour or two. Yeah, those feelings are real, and that fear is a real experience, and it can take time. And this does not mean we're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean we're not spiritual enough. It just means that we've gotten activated at a deep human level, and we are having to provide ourselves with some spiritual truth to move out of that swirl, whether the swirl is emotional, mental, imaginative, or all three of them together. And then the other thing you said is really important. It's really, really important. The more challenging the situation is, the more engaged we feel with it in a negative way. It's as if the conditions and circumstances are right here in our face. They're so in front of our face that we can't actually perceive the spiritual truth with a capital T. And this is why we have licensed practitioners and spiritual coaches, because they are trained to do this for other people, for another person. And the great news is they're not inside our engaged emotions and mental state. They're not locked inside that. And so when a practitioner, a licensed practitioner and spiritual coach does a spiritual mind treatment for us, they're able to access that deep, profound embodiment of spiritual truth. This is the spiritual truth, regardless of the condition of the what the meter said and what Cecilia's fear is and what she's imagining and what her dad's experiencing. Regardless of all of that, this is the spiritual truth, right? And so we can have faith in other people's faith as we understand that we're using universal principles that are not bound by space and time. Right? They're not, the universal principles are everywhere present, and they are active everywhere. And so this is why we can do spiritual mind treatment for ourselves, but we can also do spiritual mind treatment for another person. We can do spiritual mind treatment for a group of people. We can do spiritual mind treatment for our country or for our planet, and expect it to manifest. So when I first got into Science of Mind, I didn't actually believe that the universal laws would work for me. I truly understood that there was something so flawed about me that they would, I could see how they would work for others, but they were not going to work for me because I did not experience myself as the same as everybody else. And I knew that I was deeply flawed. And so, but I began to notice that other people would have their treatments manifest, like they would make demonstrations. And I began to hear, as Cecilia talked about practitioners, our licensed practitioners and spiritual coaches. And so I would go to them because I would watch, and they'd be like demonstrating things, and they'd be like demonstrating for other people. And so I would go to them. I had 2 or 3 that I really worked with a lot, and I would say, I don't have faith in my own spiritual mind treatment, but I have faith in your faith. I get that you know how to do spiritual mind treatment, that you believe that it will work for you, so I'm going to believe that it will work for you. Will you do spiritual mind treatment for me? And it was, well, first of all, I would have demonstrations. I would have amazing demonstrations. And I began to borrow that faith and realize that if somebody else could do a spiritual mind treatment for me, that I was worthy of having that demonstration. But I began to borrow that faith and go, well, if they can do it for me, surely I should be able to do it for myself. And I started tiptoeing into the possibility that yes, actually these universal principles would work for me as much as they would work for the practitioner who had done spiritual mind treatment for me. So never, ever, ever think that our ministers or practitioners, myself or Karen or any of our practitioners, are too busy to receive a phone call from you for a spiritual mind treatment, right? We live and breathe for that. It is such a joy to do spiritual mind treatment for others and for members of our community. And you deserve to have that spiritual support when, as Cecilia said, it was a little hard for her to find that place to stand herself. Don't hesitate to reach out. All right, I see that we have another comment.
Yes, we do. And this one's going to be coming in from Shauna Black. Shauna, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
So, Dr. Petra,
Hi, Shauna.
good morning. I just want to tell you, you're talking straight at me, and it just resonated with me tremendously today. And so, I just want to tell you that I have done spiritual mind treatment with some of the practitioners, but for over a year, I have said that I would engage somebody, to really work with me every day. And I kept not doing it. And I think a little bit of it was that I didn't do it is that part of me sitting with a practitioner is going to really require me to open my heart and be vulnerable and share my deep heart longings. But I'm calling to tell you that today you touched me so deeply that I'm going to commit to that. And I'm going to ask one of your practitioners to engage with me on a regular basis. I don't know if you call that hiring or contracting, but I know that to do that you pay a fee, and I am going to do that for myself. I'm going to gift that to myself because the part you said about, I feel like I really believe in my dreams, and what I really have planted the seed. But what really resonated with me today is I realize that sometimes I get discouraged, and without even knowing it, I give up.
Yes.
And that you're never give up, man, that just resonated with me. But you helped me understand today that I need somebody walking with me.
Yes.
So I am calling only to commit to you publicly that I am not making any excuses anymore, and I'm going to do this. And you're my accountability partner. Thank you.
Absolutely, Shauna. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm happy to be your accountability partner. And how powerful it is to have someone walk with us. I think you said that beautifully, right? When we're trying to manifest our dreams, when we're moving in the direction of that, it is a road. And we have highs and we have lows and we have detours and we have all kinds of things that are going on, even though we're committed to our dream. And again, the same thing with when we call it retain, you put a practitioner on a retainer. I have walked with many people through some really significant, interestingly enough, almost always business experiences, but also with the health challenges, and been on retainer. And I'm doing spiritual mind treatment, and we're doing coaching, and because I'm not, the practitioner that you put on retainer is not they're not in the road with you in the sense of that they're not experiencing the conditions. What they're doing is walking with you with spiritual truth. And as you walk the road and you have a high, they celebrate it and they anchor it in as a mental equivalent. And you have a low and they remember spiritual truth and they bring that spiritual truth to bear. And you have a detour, or you have a door that closes in your face, or you have an uncertainty, or whatever it is, it's part of the road. In every case, the practitioner is able to bring the spiritual truth to bear. Whatever aspect of universal principle is needed in that moment to keep the unfolding demonstration moving forward. And so I accept your commitment. I absolutely will be your accountability partner in this. And it's an extraordinary thing to say to another person, this is my dream, this is my desire. Will you support me in that? And when that person, that practitioner says yes, you have to understand that's the universe saying yes to you. Let the universe say yes to you. Get all the help you can get. Thank you, Shauna. All right. I have another comment.
Yes, so this is a real interesting question from Madeline. She asks, well, this is the quotation from the Science of Mind book, page 175. Everyone who asks, receive. Page 175, end of the first paragraph. Seems strange, Science of Mind statement, because it sounds contrary to realization.
Yes, it's a great comment, Madeline. And it is at the end of that paragraph. Everyone who asks receives according to his or her belief. And of course, Ernest Holmes was deeply embedded in the Christian tradition and pulled 50% of the science of mind from the Gospels and the teachings of Jesus, and the other 50% from Hinduism and the universal law of cause and effect. And so he often is using a scriptural reference without quotation marks. Well, he quotes people all the time. He's constantly quoting Emerson and Troward and different people and never gives them credit. Only occasionally does he say it's from Emerson or Troward. So this is a reference to the scriptural passage, ask believing you have already received, and you shall receive. So this is the illusion. Everyone who asks receives according to his belief. Do you see how he simply turned that statement around? Ask believing you have already received, and you shall receive. Right? And so that scriptural statement is exactly what we're talking about in a spiritual mind treatment. We are building within our consciousness the acceptance and the realization that spiritual truth is already true. And because it's already true, it has already manifested in consciousness. We can already see the healed condition, the grown business, the healthy relationship, the inner peace, the whatever it is we're doing spiritual mind treatment with. We do our spiritual mind treatment until we have utterly embodied it in our consciousness. That is when it becomes a belief, because we now hold that end result to be true, which means that we believe it. And when we hold it to be true, we have already received it in consciousness. And what does the universal principle, the universal law of cause and effect do? But say yes. That already received in consciousness is the cause, and the effect must be already receiving it, having that manifest or demonstrate. And so the word ask there is simply the use of the scriptural reference, and it's not asking like begging or pleading or bargaining or please, 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 please give this to me because I've been good, right? We could think of it more in terms of just a way of stating our desire and the thing that we want to demonstrate, right? So think of it in that way, that what we're asking is simply the desire, and that we receive according to our ability to believe that we have already received it. So thank you for that question. And we sometimes trip through some of the biblical references, and it's always good to clarify them, and I really appreciate it. So it's really great to spend this time with you. I want to again say Happy Father's Day. We have a fabulous celebration coming up in honoring the Divine Masculine and honoring our fathers in our Sunday celebration in just a little bit. So we hope that you'll stay with us. We're going to finish up this whole section. Let us not fool ourselves before we go on to the summary of spiritual mind healing. So please do join me next week. Join me Wednesday night. It's so lovely to be with you. Happy Father's Day. Have a beautiful Sunday. Bye for now.